Hi, welcome to Going Long Adventures, the ultra endurance podcast where we talk about ultra endurance. My name's Steve Shrubsall. Today I am with Ed Norman. Ed's back again. How's it going, mate?
Hi, mate. Yeah, all good. Yeah, thank you for having me again, mate.
No, our pleasure. The pods that you've been on, they've all been received really well. So, give them what they want. That's what I say.
Quite right too.
Yeah. How's life in New Zealand? Are you busy?
It's all right, mate. Yeah, it's had quite a few sort of you know little work opportunities coming up, and I'm still doing some work for some, I say, consultancy work, fitness wise, for people in the UK and a couple of people kind of in Europe, which is quite cool, and then a bit of stuff in Australia, mate, and just I'm in between kind of potentially getting a bit more of a secure job. And so just going through that process. But
Yeah.
it's good. It's the seasons are changing here, so it's pretty cold, hence the hoodie. Uh,
Yeah, well, they're changing here as well.
getting so
24 degrees the top today. We are loving it at last. But yeah, I was going to say, check out Ed's Instagram, Ed underscore Norman, isn't it?
Ed underscore Norman underscore, yeah.
Ed underscore Norman underscore.
Easy to find though.
And the Caliber athlete as well. I've been looking at some of your recent posts with the sort of hard gym sessions,
Oh yeah,
the ski erg,
yeah.
and the assault bike and stuff like that. I mean, they look pretty brutal sessions. So, yeah, good way to kill time in the gym.
Yeah, I know. Get the camera out and film it. I wanted to just well, it's just one of those little things of giving some people, a few ideas of how to sort of mix things up with a training effect at the end of it, as opposed to just getting a load of exercises and putting them together and calling it a session. More a case of doing something that might take the slightly more experienced, I guess, person in the gym who wants some variability to what they're doing.
Mm,
And then it might, we've all seen that workout where we're like, got to give it a try and see what all the fuss is about. And
really.
and that's what I'm doing it. So every week I'll just put a workout on the feed, and then yeah, people seem to like that sort of stuff, and I like doing those sessions and seeing how I respond, so then I can give some more feedback to anyone.
It's a great way. I think, having got into the gym recently, just this year, it's really become sort of a staple of my existence, just going down the gym for an hour and a half, most
Yeah,
days, 5 days a week. And it's good to get a really good targeted session, which you can't really, if you're riding your bike all day or running all day, it gets a bit samey.
yeah.
But if you go to the gym, you can mix it up and you see results pretty quickly as well.
Well, that's the thing, and you've started getting into the ski erg and things like that, and like obviously, a lot of these exercises have become much more popular now, especially with like high rocks, especially. Um, CrossFit, they've always been there and thereabouts, like the ski erg, the sleds, that sort of stuff. But it is really important. It is really key to have that fine line between rigid structure and adding in
Mm.
this, variation,
Yeah.
because the variation is super important to tax you differently. It doesn't mean you go off plan, completely off kilter, but these super hyper rigid structured approaches, they do work, yes, because you can measure everything you're doing, like we've spoken in lots of different previous chats and podcasts and stuff. But mate, it is that's one of the reasons why, and I think I will boil it down to like high rocks. Because it's so popular, is because people can train each individual discipline, but they still have to be good at running. So it adds that whole like you can fluctuate programming so much, and
Mm.
it's like if you're coaching someone high rocks, for example, your programming is set for like you're never going to run out of ideas because you can
Yeah.
always train each individual element. I think yeah, like having that variation. I love to have it in all the time, and it's usually because it's either because I'm picking up a niggle or I'm just knackered. So I do add in those sort of non-impact, stuff, which is massively helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the reason that Hyrox is so popular, because it is that variation. You don't get
yeah,
stuck in a rut of doing the same thing every day. Like you say, I mean, I think there are 8 or 9 different things in Hyrox? Or I
mm,
can't remember. But,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could just spend a day on each of those, couldn't you? Or but 2 of those or whatever a day. But, yeah, it's not something that I've been tempted into yet. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, very popular. And also, we probably divulge a bit into the high rocks. I don't know why I brought that up, but
Yeah.
it just basically shows the whole kind of point is that people like variation and they like to be challenged.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if it's going towards like whether it's kind of moving linear to your progression and it's a little bit, too intense, less intense, but as long as the trajectory's there of improving your fitness and improving your output and you feel good and you want to go to the gym, then I can't say anything bad about it, to be honest. I definitely put them into people's programs that go maybe have done a race or done an event, and then they want a little bit of a kind of a change up
Mm.
of mental kind of stimulus, like you said, and then
Mm.
they put them on a series of doing some variation, and they sort of find out what they might want to go towards next. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Anyway, let's get to the nuts and bolts of this one, because I've grafted hard researching this topic we're going to talk about today, all in the name of good journalism. I went out today being Saturday, the 25th of April. It's been a hot one today in the UK, about temperatures like maybe 25 at points.
No
And
way.
yeah, 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 24, 25. Loving it. Pure
What
blue
move
sky.
that?
Yeah, yes. Beautiful, beautiful countryside at the moment. All the birds are singing. The fields are looking superb. The countryside is just looking phenomenal, as it does
Okay, get on
every
with your point, Steve.
But yeah, I did a route um in the North Wessex Downs on foot called the Hampshire Hoppet. It's not quite a 50K, but it felt like a 50K. And that's what we're talking about today, training for your first 50K. And obviously, I've done a fair few 50Ks in the past, but today, just so it's fresh in my head, so Ed can sort of tell me where I've gone wrong, and you too, hopefully. Yeah, we'll get into some of the balls ups that I made. Well, I don't think they're balls ups. They're just sort of, you know, hiccups that people come across when you're doing long distance running, because your body can completely collapse over that duration, especially on a hilly. 'Cause I think most 50Ks, there's a certain amount of elevation in them. It's usually, at least 1,000 feet, and they're mostly on trails. So already there, we got loads of factors, um, which make the 50K hard. So first of all, today I set off out of a place called Kingsclear, and went straight up to Watership Down, which is straight out the block, a sort of 2-mile climb. I hiked it hard, and first thing that I felt was my calves basically burning. Yeah. So, are there any sort of strength exercises we can do for those spiky starts, or for those long, we're talking sort of 15% gradient here. So, that it really does burn your carbs. Is there anything we
Yeah.
can do in the gym or out on the road, to help us, build strength in our carbs?
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of different things you can do. I think for you, mate, because you've got, a good solid foundation of strength anyway. I think in that instance, you might have maybe potentially spent a little bit longer time warming up. Um,
Right.
potentially, activating them, get them working, maybe done a little bit of kind of like release on them.
Yeah, if I can interrupt you a minute. Yeah, absolutely. That was my first thought. It took me ages to get into the groove. It took me ages
Yeah.
for my legs to feel awake. So
Yeah.
even on a sort of 50K, which is like a long sort of effort, you'd suggest a warm up prior?
Yeah. I, yeah. I personally, if it's all very, case by case, if you're experiencing that terms of the beginning, then, and that it's quite quick, it's quite fast, I guess, like uphill straight away. It doesn't hurt spending a bit of time just activating those tissues, and because something like a 50K and also training for a 50K, you get a lot of kind of like repetitive strain, don't you?
Mm.
And some people kind of think that they'll warm up in the first few miles, and then they'll get into the swing of things. But that's a good way of doing it, and I've certainly done that before. Sometimes when a warm up, I haven't had time to have a warm up. We'll
Mm.
go into that story in a minute. It's a funny story, mate. To be honest, I got about that. Um, but if it's going to be hilly right out of the box, you're not going to have that much chance to warm up when you're starting, your run, for example, today. And so your calves are going to start burning up straight away. And sometimes you might need to then walk the flats at the top and then sort of ease into it a bit slower. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes in a way that's good in a training run because you kind of can highlight those points. But perfect example is just spending 2 or 3 minutes for you doing some activation on those areas, doing a bit of stretching through the knee, doing a bit of stretching through the hip, very basic. But in terms of the strengthening for that, general calf strengthening, is pretty straightforward. You ultimately want to build some stiffness in the ankle, some stiffness in the calf generally. So start by doing some kind of like holding isometrics, some yielding isometrics, maybe some overcoming isometrics on the calf. So basically pushing into fixed objects and moving a immovable resistance. Yeah, so like an immovable force. So like putting a bar, like I think we've chatted about this before, putting a bar underneath a rack and pushing into it. So you are not able to move the bar, but you're obviously pushing all of your stress into the calf. That's one really great way of building up some capacity in there, and
And
then adding some reps.
what would a session look like doing that? I mean, how long would you push into it for, and how many times would you do it?
So a lot of people just bolt on a bit of calf training to the end of this kind of classic old school. It's like do a set of calf raises at the end of a session, and for a lot of people, that is just not enough stimulus for that area and for that muscle group, because in terms of the muscle group and where it attaches and its role, etc., it's a massive muscle group. Really, it's got huge, deep layers to it. Very kind of like the superficial layers of the calf can get really irritated quite a lot of the times, and then we put loads of stress and loads of pressure on them. So building up to like 3 sets of 45 seconds on a hold is kind of a general kind of rule of thumb, and just also making sure that you haven't got any real sort of standout weaknesses between your left and your right side. So those 3 sets of 45 seconds in a top contraction, like, so you're pushing through your toes, heels are lifting off the ground, straight leg, and you're just holding that position for 45 seconds. And then once you've got some capacity and some tolerance there, you just can work some eccentrics. So, basic stuff, going up with 2 legs, down with 1 leg, again, building some eccentric tolerance to it. And then you can start adding some repetitions, some higher loads, some higher reps. And I would do that every day, not every day, sorry, every session that I would be in the gym, I would work on some sort of component of the calf, because as we know, that muscle group, um, you know, sort of can go up to around 8 to 10 times your body weight. And I've actually had a calf strain in the last 2 weeks. I've never ever had a calf issue in my life.
Mm.
And for some odd, strange reason, I did like a park run. I did a hard bike session up some really steep hills on my bike, and just not really used to that level of kind of cranking the gears.
Mm.
Um, and then the next day did a kind of a fastish park run. And the next morning I woke up with really stiff ankle. I was like, what's going on here? And the next morning was Achilles, then it was into the soleus, and I was pretty worried, mate. I was like, fucking hell, I've done something here. I've pulled something. But all it literally just some random overloading of that area. because I haven't really devoted as much time recently to it.
Yeah.
So it just, again, it's just a highlighting thing. But yeah, that's what I would suggest. And I would do the frequency of calf training is quite an important variable. Once a week is probably not enough, but it's 2 to 3 times is kind of a good sweet spot for that. Yeah. And you can mix up what you do in each session. One session might be an isometric drill. One session might be an eccentric loading. And then session might be kind of a plyometric kind of, maybe doing some pogo jumps, doing some hops, doing some single leg lands. Just again, you don't just want to have strong calves. They want to be pliable, and they want to be able to land as well. Generate land, like landing
Totally,
forces,
totally.
braking forces. Yeah,
On the hilly run, I mean, they are so important. Like a good strong calf when you're going up a hill, it's the first thing that hurts, isn't it? It's not the quad.
yeah,
It's those that start burning when it's 10% plus. It's carbs all the time, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally, and the calf relates to what the foot's doing, and then vice versa, and then what the knee's doing. So what I found in the past is people that have had old injuries in the hip, the knee, the quad, the hamstring, they generally don't use the calf as much when they're actually running.
Mm,
And they can, or sorry, they might be offloading an old injury, or not addressed an old injury. So they start overloading certain compartments of the certain areas of the joints and the muscles. So it's just about having that all-rounded approach really to leg training. And leg training for somebody that wants to just build strength is not the same as leg training for someone who wants to do like ultra runs. It's just a different approach
yeah.
basically.
Oh, yeah, because
Uh,
you see bodybuilders, don't you, training their carbs. I guess it's just for cosmetic reasons, like not functional.
well, it is exactly, and you can see someone who's got really big, thick, strong calf muscles,
Mm,
and it doesn't necessarily carry over to better running at all.
no.
Usually the opposite. Lots of faster runners have kind of quite shortened calf muscles. It's kind of, they kind of pull up towards the origin of the calf, um, towards the knee, basically. So that allows them to have a little bit more kind of, work, sort of reliance on the soleus muscle. So they get stronger, kind of like plantar flexors, like basically stronger kind of movement and stiffness at the ankle. And then people who have really big, bulky calves tend to struggle with
Mm,
running, because a lot of it is genetics with calf development. So
yeah.
much of it is how the sort of insertions and origins of the muscle belly, and sort of where it moves, how that into sort of gives you an availability of how much you can grow the areas. But when you're looking at growing the muscle just for the either look or just for looking fuller,
Mm.
it won't necessarily carry over to like the properties of running. So it's
Well, there
quite
won't be
specific.
any endurance in that muscle, will there?
Well, yeah, a lot of people just train them with like a basic 3 sets of 15 reps or 3 sets of 20 reps. Don't get me wrong, that's all good. But
Mm.
you want to develop the components of the calf when you're landing, and
Mm.
when the repetition of that. So if you're doing 10,000 or 20, 30,000 steps and you're landing on your forefoot the whole time, your calf obviously wants to tolerate that load. So
Mm.
there's no point in just doing 40 calf raises. It's not going to build that capacity as much that you need it for.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, and obviously we could go outside and just do hill reps.
yeah, yeah, mate. I mean, yeah, that's one way of getting loads of eccentric loaded to it. Yeah.
Mm.
But sometimes the isometric training is a super good way for people to sort of start doing it. Entry level, just building on some isometric strength,
Mm.
is something that I would massively recommend for anyone who is not directly training their calves already, sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, that's me because I've never, ever done a calf, never, not once, done a calf exercise. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I better start doing that.
that's the next thing we need to give you, mate.
Yeah. Um, okay, so I've got up this first steep hill, and and I'm in quite a lot of discomfort, and not really settled in. 2 miles in, I'm thinking, oh, what am I doing here? And then, okay, started trotting along at the top, and obviously the UK, this is sort of UK based, and I dare say anywhere in the world based, but after a winter of rain and puddles, when you get a bit of heat, they will dry out and you get all these big rain ruts and the ground is just all horrible. You know what I mean? It's
Mm.
when you're running off road, you're very lucky, you know, around fields and stuff like that, which was predominantly what it was today. You got, you know, tractor marks in there, tractor tire marks in there, and basically my ankles are getting absolutely pasted. You know, I'm trying to keep a good cadence going, good rhythm going, but I'm all over the place because, you know, I'm looking where I'm putting my feet and then I'm turning an ankle. Then I guess um, there's a way to strengthen ankles up or the sort of shin. So you're less likely to maybe turn over an ankle, or is it just me being stupid and turning over my ankles?
No, mate. Again, it's like any skill, it needs developing, and without it sounds very cliche, but the stuff that you do, the stuff that you do in the gym and the runs that you do on the flat or the road, etc., they prepare you to a certain degree, but they don't actually prepare the other components of running on uneven terrain. And you can go down a big rabbit hole of this, and people sell a lot of courses, for example, on these little kind of one percenters, right? So they
Mm,
try and they cut all the really long mileage that you need, and the components of fitness, etc. And they look at these kind of intricacies as like these are the things that are going to make or break your life in terms of a run. And
mm,
they're not really, but they need to be trained in a certain way. So like if you're going out and looking at, you're looking at your immediate area, so like that little area of kind of like your 5 meter radius in front of you, for example, where you're putting your feet, and then you're looking a little bit in front of you, so on 20 meters as an example. Okay. So kind of call it 5 and 20. So you're looking at your immediate area, you're looking at 20 meters in front of you, and
yeah,
you're building that awareness of what's coming up. And also you're trying to have a degree of um, relative consciousness on what your feet are doing.
yeah.
But you don't want to be wasting energy on what those are doing, because it takes a lot of energy up. So your
Mm.
body starts to go, I'm using all of my energy, and where am I putting my feet?
Clearly, my heart rate was just through the roof and it was flat. You know what
Exactly.
I mean?
Exactly, mate. So it increases that relative fatigue. And what happens then you are focusing too much on what you're doing in your immediate area, that you don't really look ahead of you. And what happens then is that your thinking and your body it's not relying on a neural network that you've already built up. And if that's why you see some runners on trail who are subconsciously flying down the hills, yes, they've trained that movement so their body can actually tolerate going downhill, the muscles and the joints,
Mm,
etc. But they're not thinking about their foot placement particularly. It's all being built up with that certain components and properties of awareness, proprioception, coordination, all the components of fitness that are usually not really thought about.
mm,
Um, so that's when you look at this, for example, some cambered surface running. So like running on a gradient that is kind of left to right sloped or right to left slope, doing
yeah,
some runs across that slope.
yeah,
I was pretty blessed because obviously I live on the South Downs. I did anyway.
yeah.
And we were blessed with all cambered runs, cambered
Mm,
surfaces. So I could just run on the fields when there was like, my leg was higher on my left than my right. So I could
yeah,
work on that kind of hip drop. I can work on that kind of, inversion of my, if it's kind of left to right, so left to right sloping down, I could work on that inversion of my right side. I could work on that kind of eversion on the left side. I could create that kind of stiffness in kind of, opposition, and then I would work the other side, and then I'd do some steep downhill work, looking at those components of focusing and building on that kind of coordination and balance. There are quite a lot of properties, and you don't really get that in the gym. You
no,
can't really
you
replicate that.
can't, can you? Yeah,
No, and that's the kind of beauty of why people are kind of drawn to the trails, and they want to get into sort of longer things. And I think everyone is very obsessed with the distance, and they're like, "Oh, that's a really hard, fast, long distance." But they generally forget and overlook the fact that, you know, there's a lot of skill that goes into
It's next
effectively.
level. You know, if you look at the profile of the run I did today, it was up, down, up, you know, there was no flat in it. But I
Yeah,
was struggled. I struggled, you know, I struggled with the downhills, I struggled with the uphills, you know, it was just hard, you know,
yeah,
from mile 1 onwards. So you'd
yeah,
suggest, yeah, I mean, that sounds like a good idea. So sort of, I mean, that's gonna sort of train your, ligaments as well, your ankles and your, shins as well, isn't it, to a degree, running on those off camber,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so when I did a lot of that sort of training, and I was really focused on it, really rough terrain, it's like sort of like tuttocky grass,
Yeah, I know the stuff.
chalk,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
chalky,
yeah.
slippery,
South Downs, yeah.
think, thinking. Yeah,
Mm,
I when I did that with the right dose of overload without overdoing it, because it does require a bit of time for planning.
yeah.
Because you know you can't just go do the session like that, for example, and then the next day go into like a super heavy strength training session, whatever. You know you're going to have some limiting factors to that, and the risk reward is quite high because you're putting loads of stress on the lower limb. But when I was doing that, coupled with a good, you know, obviously I write my own sort of planning, obviously in programming,
Mhm.
I never got injured, mate. The only injuries I ever got really were a little bit of tightness, maybe, and a bit of restriction, maybe in the kind of the shin, the sort of tibialis anterior, sort of low down. I might get a little bit of tenderness and tightness there, but that's just because it's loading a lot. And
Mm,
I felt so good and so like springy by
mm.
training all of those properties, that, you know, it's so enjoyable to go out
And
and do those
how
sorts
often
of
did you
sessions.
do you obviously were training for, a trail run at the time. How often did you do that session?
So I would do, I was having this chat with someone the other day, mate.
Mm,
We were just sort of reminiscing about the training sessions we used to do.
mm,
And mate, like I would do, there are obviously people out there who train a lot longer and faster and harder than I do. But for me at the time, it was pretty big. It was pretty big. I would go out in the morning, maybe at maybe around 6 a.m., go and do, I don't know, 6 to 8 miles of kind of hills, maybe getting around 800 to 900 meters, maybe, you know, 2,500 feet, for example.
mm,
And then I would go back home and then I would probably do some kettlebells and then I would get the train into London and I'd purposely get the train into a kind of maybe a different station dotted around London so I
mm,
could run a bit further to where I was working. And I'd have a backpack doing that as well,
mm,
maybe 20 kilos or something. And then I'd go to the gym, train clients, then I'd then do a session at lunch, might be 1,500 feet or 2,000 feet on the treadmill, and then up, and then I'd run back, do a day's work, run back to, you know, 3 or 4 miles with about 20 kilos again, get the train back. And sometimes what I used to do on the way home is get a stop short of about 3 different train stations and then run another maybe 7 or 8 miles. And then, that would just be rinse and repeated, mate.
yeah.
But obviously that didn't really work long term because you pick up a lot of repetitive strain injuries.
Well,
But
especially if you're running that much, something's bound to give, I guess, at some point.
yeah, I was just, I think it was National Rail. I was thinking, well, they're gonna collapse at any stage, so I better be ready to run to run home.
Yeah.
But in terms of a session, like I would do that, I would start by doing it once a week because what you'll find that it does take a lot of time, maybe 2 days, 48 hours to sort of for your body to actually, this is the thing, you might feel fine, but the all the structures have been really kind of like resisting
Mm,
kind of torque. And they take time to recover from that. Like you said, the ligaments and the tendons especially are the ones that take the time to deal with the stressor.
yeah.
So once a week, moving it to maybe once a week of devoted time and sessions around steep up, steep downs, cambered, sort of dodging your foot, maybe doing sort of like, the kind of zigzags down the hill, working on some of those properties. Tighter spaces, so like tree lined or like with trees overhanging, so it kind of increases that kind of alertness state, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then you would have known that being on a bike doing bloody 60 miles an hour or something, your senses really increase if you're on a kind of, if it's.
Yeah, you just close your eyes and hope for the best.
And then what I would do maybe is, if obviously your race is like, for example, 50K, I would see how those things are translating into kind of like one of your longer sessions in the week. So do I see a direct carryover to my descending? Do I see less fatigue when I'm having to go on uneven ground? Yes, because I'm doing something that is actually devoted to those components.
Yeah.
And then that's it. That's literally, you're building resistance to fatigue, basically. So once a week is ample.
Okay. Right. Okay. That I'll start running, zigzagging down hills.
Well, stairs are good. That little stair video that you put up, that they're a really good way of developing some of that, you know, um, loading versus landing
What
versus
the
awareness.
stair mill?
No, like, I think you did a video of you doing some stair reps or something
Oh
a
yeah,
while
yeah.
back.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love doing those. Just
So going down there quick.
vert, innit? Yeah.
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 New Zealand's blessed with stairs, mate. I think I said this before in the last, well, there's so many stairs here.
Mm.
Um, and you definitely get a lot of detraining effect when you're running up and down stairs. It's like pretty
Right.
specific, isn't it? It's like, I've got a
Yeah.
couple of people training for a 100K and a 100 miler. They live in Australia, and a lot of the training has been around stairs and building on those properties of the lower limb on a stairs. I trained someone for a race in Cape Town, 100K, and it's all stairs.
Right.
And they were really good at running and really good at going down kind of gradual switchbacks, for example. But when it came to the stairs, they were like almost limping down them, because they hadn't trained that, like, you have to go down them quickly.
Mm.
Otherwise you're going to like back off like a horse, you're going to kind of go, whoa, and sort of like,
Yeah.
and the fear factor was there. So we train that, and people do well, funny old thing, when they train those properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't beat a staircase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Just
actually
that.
I actually Google, like, spend my time Googling, where's the longest set of stairs, in.
Mate, I've done that. And it's Covent Garden Tube, mate, for me.
What?
Um,
All
it
right.
used to be.
Um, yeah, we've got a couple of we got the ones in Winchester down there, but they're always really busy, so you're trying to run up and you're, like, kicking dogs and kids out of the way. No, not really.
Yeah. No, I feel your pain, mate. There are some really good places around Ditchling Beacon that have got some really good stairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know it's a little bit far for you, but mate, I used to go, if I was waiting between clients, I'd go to Marylebone or even over to Covent Garden and just rep the stairs, mate. It was not good for the lungs, but it worked.
Yeah, God, it's a short shot. I mean, that is a good session, just repping stairs like 10 times or whatever.
Well, I used to, because sometimes when I
Look at you,
do,
funny, but
I did 50 of Marylebone before, and basically I was getting a bit annoyed at myself. I was like, this is too much running down between the commuters. So I'd go up and I'd do maybe 30 or 40, and then the last 10 I'd go up and then get the lift down with all the people.
yeah,
It's quite funny.
use the sweat. We're talking about downhills, like, okay, I wasn't too bad with downhills initially today, but as you can expect, they started to take their toll. I mean, techniques for running downhill. I mean, you don't sort of, advocate long strides, do you? Or was it a short stride or a long stride? Just a sort of, gentle-ish sort of 10% hill?
Yeah, I again, a really sort of a really trusted, like, good friend, trainer, coach who I used to work with. He now lives in Europe, in kind of Portugal, and he's online. And we had this chat the other day about downhill running. He basically asked me what I thought about a client or someone who was the kind of topic of discussion came up. And my reply to him was, you you can't replicate that without doing it. And there'll be lots of comebacks to that. I'll be like, oh, well, you can just still develop all the jumping and the landing. Yes, you can, but you can't understand how the rest of your body kind of articulates itself when you go downhill, because sometimes people kind of put their arms out and
Mm.
they have like a kind of like, a kind of falcon. They're kind of like paragliding down the hill. And what
You always
that's doing
in
is obviously,
yeah,
it's obviously giving them a bit of a kind
balance.
of parachute effect.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and with everything on downhill, the best downhill runners in the world don't think about what they're doing downhill. They just fly down the bloody thing, right?
Mm.
And if you look at any incredible fell runner, right, it's got some good mates that live up in the fells. If you watch them running downhill, they just fly down it, mate. They are just
I've
so
seen them.
trained.
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah,
them. It's just they jumped. One guy nearly practically jumped over my head.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, mate. Because they're having to
down.
jump over those walls.
Yeah, yeah. They are at next level, these people. They're obviously very, very thin, very supple, and I've never seen anything like it. Jesus, where did he come from? It was like that.
Well, this is what we were saying to. Sorry, going back to what I was saying before to one of my mates, a really good coach, and he was. We were talking about that, and we were talking about what's the best way, what's the best exposure sort of grading to doing and getting better at running downhill, and it is a massive component of running, and especially ultras, is going downhill, because 50% of the race, or so, is usually downhill,
Mm,
unless you're starting at high altitude and obviously just running down. However, um, short little strides for most people getting into trails and downhills is the most effective way of conserving energy and obviously keeping a kind of a low sort of carriage of the legs. So when the carriage is lower, obviously we're not lifting the legs as high and landing as
mm,
like you'd see a fell runner do, because they're running over very uneven terrain, very very tussocky, wet, grassy moles, etc.
mm,
They need to do that to get over that and transit over that ground as quick as possible. They can't do short little steps and expect it to be efficient and fast. But for the most and the majority of people, if they're doing like a kind of packed trail, a mud trail or grassy trail, whatever, is working on getting those legs turning over a little bit quicker.
mm,
Uh, so basically, it's a very basic formula of the more rise and fall you have in your head, the more weight you're translating into the ground, right? And then ultimately, the more you have that production of kind of elasticity going forwards again. So if we can keep our rise and fall as limited as possible, in terms of how much our legs lift and how much our head
mm,
dips,
mm.
we're going to be conserving energy.
Yeah.
And if you, with that, and then going in how much you weigh, this is the chat I had with my mate, is those two factors play into how efficient you can be for the majority of people, unless you're kind of, are a fell runner or an elite sky runner.
Mm,
So the weight, how much you weigh, your carriage, rise and fall, and your cadence for most people is the kind of fast, short cadence, try and reduce a bit of body weight, and then it all becomes relatively much
mm.
easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, yeah, race dependent and route dependent. If it's shallower trails that's kind of very much more kind of rolling and even, it's easier to develop a bit of speed on the downs. But if it's super technical, super steep, obviously you're going to have to, expect the unknown. Your body's going to have to lunge into a position because it can't step in a perfectly kind of curated route. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah. And of course, you've got, as the race progresses and you're more fatigued,
yeah,
you're going to be dragging legs and potentially tripping up, catching a foot on a rock or a root or something.
yeah, yeah.
Just makes it so difficult. I mean, I had a couple of near misses today, managed to stay upright, which is pretty surprising me. I normally end up on the floor quite a lot. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I guess that all comes with building stamina.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And there's no shortcuts to it, mate. Like you
yeah,
said, and because there are so many demands on the body when you're doing like these sorts of things that is very overlooked. I think in a lot of people, like what I said before about people just see, oh, what's your time, what's your distance? Like when you think about it, if there's something I want to do down here, in New Zealand, there's a challenge that I want to try and do, and you look at the profile and you're like, okay, it's around 80K. It's got 7,500 meters of climbing. Okay, so it's pretty hefty.
that is a stacked route, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's challenging. It's pretty
Mm.
challenging. But when you say put that on paper to somebody, they'll go, "Oh, it's all right. It's doable." But when you look at the terrain, mate, it is like
Mm.
you can be moving at sometimes you can moving at 1K an hour,
Yeah.
and these factors are like you said, it's all about accrued fatigue. So what is your body doing at 80 or 70, 80K? You know, it's going to look completely different from 20K. So your training needs to replicate that accrued fatigue. But it's got to be very, very carefully kind of balanced. And
Yeah.
ultimately, that is why coaching in this space essentially is very, very difficult to do because the variables are so exponential. It's not just about getting some muscle and getting a bit stronger. There are so many factors. And it's very difficult. It's a very difficult area to coach in to be effective.
Mm.
But you know, ultimately, this is why in this field, in terms of running coaching, usually the best coaches in this field, particular, are the ones who are good athletes,
Mm.
and have experienced a lot of these things. And with running coaching generally, um, experience is a massive part of sharing that. Obviously, in everything it is, but you don't need to be an amazingly ripped bloke to teach strength training. You do need to be relatively strong and competent and move, etc. But the articulation of the pieces is a bit more simpler.
Mm.
It's a bit more kind of linear. Um, because you ultimately somebody responds to a stimulus, you can make quite an easy adaptation. Whereas if someone takes 6 months to get over a little calf niggle because they can't run uphill, it takes a completely different approach to
Mm.
to manage those. And it's the same, with getting into ultras and getting into marathons, and
Mm.
it's a tough space to
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
client to get a
Yeah.
result as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Like you say, it's almost got to be bespoke to a certain course, isn't it?
Very, and
Yeah.
and people, it's a struggle, mate, because there are some very, very. I've looked at some AI templates. I'm never going to use them, obviously, but I've seen people use these for running coaching. And mate, it's like you do a session and then it automates you a feedback report, and it's like, what? This is just obscene because people like it, mate, and people think that it's better than nothing, so I'll use it. And it's the way the space is going. Um, but it's long term learning and building that relationship between kind of coaching, implementation, learning, feedback. You don't get that.
No.
But I know a lot of people who are using these kind of AI generated programs for
Mm.
trails, and of course they're going to see a not a beginner, but of course they're going to see a beginner return on their investment, right? They're going to get some improvement. and they
Mm.
think, oh, the light bulb's on. I'm going to be doing this now for the foreseeable. But it doesn't work 5 years down the line. It doesn't work. So yeah, anyway, we go down a rabbit hole with that. But
Yeah, yeah, I
like
get
you,
what you mean. You know, you're training certain bodies.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
basically,
talking of which, I have an issue. Well, I've got lots of issues, but we'll talk about my body. So when I get in about 20 miles into a run, my glutes, like as they did today, they're all over the place. It doesn't feel like my legs are sort of doing what my brain is telling them to do. I've got sort of pelvis issues. You know, they're sort of aching all around the pelvis, but particularly the glutes. So that was probably the biggest issue I had today, sort of the mechanics of my legs not working. Well, obviously calves, hamstrings, quads, they sort of behave to a degree, but this was sort of game ending stuff, you know, where I've got to stop and stretch it out.
mm,
They're so tense, you know, they're so stressed. And obviously I know, you know, you do this stretch, you do that stretch. For glutes though, I mean, are there again, would it sort of be the running on and off camber type thing that would strengthen the glutes up?
yeah. I mean, really good point, and that's really common. I would say that the industry in terms of strength training for running is very, very, very basic. You know, you look at a flex extend pattern like a glute bridge,
Yeah.
something that has an axial load like an RDL or a deadlift, for example, sort of getting the glutes, hamstrings, etc. And then you'd look at maybe doing some split squats, like Bulgarian split squats, getting the glute loading, some step downs, getting the glute loading. These are fine, but ultimately, the way that the glute functions when you're fatigued is your body structurally is always going to go back to its default of what is trained and what is not. So doing a set of glute bridges, yes, it's going to strengthen up your glutes, but how is that going to carry over 20 miles in? Like you just perfectly kind of annotated there. The muscle and the way that it interacts with the hip and the way that it's lengthening when you're going up more hills and it's under a lot more constant eccentric kind of tolerant tension, it's going to break down if you're doing a set of 15 glute bridges and expecting that to be enough. The way, and also this is why early stage rehabilitation is really bad, like open chain exercises to get the hip working, but it doesn't interact with the glute. The glute doesn't interact with the hip. The hamstring doesn't interact with the quad. So ultimately, your glutes want to be working with everything else. So you want to get your foot pronating. You want to get your glutes lengthening. You want to get the hip abducting. You want to get the kind of so the pelvis sort of abducting, the hip internally rotating on top of the knee, and then the foot pronating. So as an example. So when you're looking at training the glutes, they need to be really integrated with the other body parts, basically. So you create a real kind of kinetic chain response to how the glute is loading. The problem is that we always end up isolating the glute max or the glute medius, and then we don't understand how that interacts with the hip and the knee. And this is there is a lot of complexity to prescribing a program for this, right?
Mm.
It's not getting the glutes looking better. It's getting them functioning better when they
Yeah,
are
it's just
fatigued.
it's my glute medius. I can feel that exact point. It hurts, you know, you can actually feel the epicenter of the pain, you know? It
Yeah.
yeah.
So, for example, um, firstly, when you're going back to super basics, is priority principle. So if you're identifying that there is a kind of a weak, I put in inverted commas, a weak link.
Without doubt.
Yeah.
It's always been a weak link for me. Yeah,
So
it's the first thing that goes
if
properly.
it's glutes or it's calves, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
what has been your main training modality up to the point of now maybe changing from cycling to running? It's been cycling.
Mm.
Cycling is obviously going to be a very specific pattern where the glute is not. It's basically going to be lengthened a lot more of the time than shortened. So the back, lower back, the whole kind of lumbo-pelvic hip complex, for example, how that's interacting with the knee is very, very specific to your cycling. And you want it to be like that because it creates your efficiency. But when you're actually running and doing other much more kind of like absorption and kind of like force productive movement and impact work, the glute works very differently. It also has a lot more of a kind of frontal plane demand and a rotational demand because your pelvis is rotating, you're fatiguing, you're moving and hitching into one side, whatever it may be. And when you're tired, you favor the side that your body can tolerate more load onto.
Mm.
Um, so the glutes are working very, very differently, and they're articulating in completely different planes of motion at different times, at different rates, at different stances, at different times in the race, at different speeds, and all these sorts of things. So there's lots of factors going into that. But having said all that, general preparedness of the whole hip musculature is about priority principle and focusing on those areas because that's all you can really do in the short term. And then the long term and the medium term, the long term builds up to more general capacity. However, you've got to train those. There's nothing wrong with you spending a devoted amount of time isolating key areas and then start to integrating those into
Mm.
more kind of specific patterns, if you essentially that into the running. Because people don't have this massive thing about you've got weak glutes. Right? The glutes are not weak; they're just not articulating and working as efficiently for your chosen discipline that you want to train them for. Now, you can do all the testing and all the forced production plates and everything to assess some weakness in terms of a specific test that isolates the area to have an objective marker, right? So when you're testing the glute strength, your test result is based on the test that you've done.
Mm.
Yeah. Whereas if you do that at 25 miles, tests don't really matter.
No.
So, but what it does, it gives you a starting block to build on. So you identify the weakness, you then approach it specifically, you then go out onto your run again and see whether it's now the limiting factor. At least then you've got some gauge and measure of what has been working and what not.
So you wouldn't say it's running style then? Is it gait or anything like that? Is that what it is?
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
that's what I said. So it's definitely so when the strength work integrates with the actual pattern being running gait and mechanics of the running action, etc. They want to carry over. So that's why your movement when you're strength training does want to be quite specific to the kind of gait cycle generally. So hips want to be extending, your hips so this kind of like the hip, top of the hip bone, your hips want to be extending, the glute the rec fem muscle wants to be lengthening. Our pelvis wants to be staying relatively neutral. And when we're extending the hip, we don't want to be tipping the pelvis all the way over forwards.
Right.
We want to be extending. We want to then be flexing the knee, keep staying in an extension, with the knee directly kind of underneath the hip as the foot comes through. We want to stay going from an extending hip into a flexing hip forwards, but then landing underneath that kind of center of mass.
Mm.
And that effectively is going to create more efficiency. So our strength training kind of wants to make sure that we are approaching those fundamental components.
You'll have to draw a diagram, and we can or actually, if you could do something in the gym, maybe we could stick it up on social media because I'm sure many people are trying to picture what you're saying. But
Yeah. I'll do a video of
yeah,
basically, there are lots of videos out there, right? But I'll do a video of what an optimal, in inverted commas, running gait looks like versus how it can structurally break down. I'll do that for you, mate, and I'll send it
Yeah,
to you.
I think my steps are too. I don't know. I'm no expert on gait, that's for sure. I just know that mine probably isn't optimal. Well, if my body's starting to break down, if the mechanics of my body's starting to break down at 20 miles on a whenever I go out for that amount of time,
Yeah.
something's wrong with it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say that you're probably just at a little bit of a ceiling of what your mind can go further, so can your aerobic system, but the mechanics just need
Oh,
maybe
God.
a little bit of this. This is where programming and periodization is so important with running, is you want to have times where you wave load it a little bit more, and then you take some of the stressor away and give that tissue time to kind of, assimilate the load that you've put into it. And that's why running programming and why these 12 weeks to a marathon is just it's not workable for a
Mm,
lot of people,
no.
because running progression is never a straight line. So if your ceiling is 20 or 18 to kind of 22, that's
Mm,
where you really start to feel it. Building some capacity at 13, 14, and getting your body used to getting more efficient in those sort of that sub-maximal
What
duration
what I was
is a
thinking
great way of adapting.
what I was thinking today, actually, when I was out on my run, it was a question I wanted to ask you was, um, would a good way of training for these long days, be to sort of maybe hike the first if we were gonna do, say, 20 miles, hike the first the 10 and then run the second? Mm,
Well, mate, it's all training in it.
yeah.
Training, this is why training needs to be a kind of a process, right? And then like not like an exploratory sort of self-assessment in a way. And when people are so fixated on the running distance versus the time versus the elevation, they forget that your body's just your body, mate. It can only deal with a certain amount of prolonged stress,
Why do we
basically.
do it to ourselves? I know we
Well,
absolutely
mate,
love it, but,
I, I, I've I've trained so many different ways to get the same outcome. Like I know we've chatted about this before, and there are so many different ways to get the same outcome. Lots of people think high amounts of frequency of training, so training way more regularly, is the kind of the key to running. So sort of dosage versus what you can respond to, and versus doing more of the same activity, you get more of the benefit. Some people are like, okay, that works for some people, but it doesn't work for others. Some people need a bit more supporting stuff either side of it. Um, and some people don't have the time. So in terms of physiology and you call chemistry around it, is obviously the more you expose yourself to running, the more running, the easier running becomes relative to what your kind of capacity is. So running is obviously so specific. You can get away with doing 2 or 3 runs a week, but if you want to progress to bigger stuff, you definitely need to be running more. From my experience working with people and myself, the more frequently I am running, the more my body can tolerate that specific load,
mm,
tolerance. But that doesn't mean doing 10 miles a day. That means just wave loading that response. So going back to your question, in terms of a long run, most of my long training would be hiking,
right.
because if the race I'm doing is 2,000 meters of climbing and it's 55K or 50K, I'm not going to be running. I have ran all of the hills in a few races that distance, but most of my training is focusing on efficiency
Mm.
and and making sure that the next day I'm not so broken, or the next week, 2 weeks afterwards, I'm so broken that I can't go back and do anything. Um, so efficiency, and you get that through your training. The big mistake that a lot of people make is they try and run all of the long sessions because they want to keep a consistent average split on Strava, when actually, when
Guilty.
a-
Although mine is shit anyway, but yeah.
So I was looking you in the eye when I was saying
I
that, mate.
want to
I'm
be
joking.
consistently shit. Yeah, it's working so far.
But the hiking element and what appeals people to more kind of like mountain trail races and all that sort of stuff is that they definitely need to train
Mm.
those abilities, because those abilities you can rely on. You know, there's a lot more to it than actually just walking. There is, it's a chance for your heart rate to go back to, if you spiked it, chance to go back to kind of aerobic, just below aerobic threshold. So you're working on sort of submaximal overloads.
Mm.
Um, you're then able to take on food and fuel and water. You're able to look up, look around, assess, you know, dynamic assessment all the time. And that's what walking is, hiking and stuff like that. And that's why it's such an important part about doing ultra training.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I must admit, I am partial to walking
which-
during an ultra.
but you know, when we said about all the other senses that are involved with training, like running, you know, looking at where you're putting your feet, looking at the sort of all that sorts of components of it, just walking and getting a change of stimulus on the body, bringing the heart rate down, you're relaxing those senses
Mm.
to then also rely on them again in the next section of the route. So
Yeah.
you're compartmentalizing different fatigue components, and then you're getting more efficient of them, and you're going into that zone when you need it, and then you're bringing it out again. And that's the whole point about longevity, isn't it? With a distance, is
Well, I
being
just
efficient.
don't, for me, it's just a false economy running up hills. There's no point. If anything's over 5%, I won't touch it. There's no point. There's no point at my weight. Um, it's just a complete, it, you know, it's the, it would spell out basically the end of a race. So
Yeah,
yeah, I just don't bother. And I like it. I like walking up hills as well because, like you say, you get to look around and you get to sort of reset a bit, drink, do a bit of eating, and
yeah,
like try and enjoy yourself as well.
exactly. And I think, you know, there's quite a few good features on a few good training kind of tools and platforms. You know, you've got Training Peaks, you've got Training Stress Score. So you've
Mm.
got like, you know, you've got your heart rate and your zonal training versus the duration you're in that zone. And sort of it kind of affects, you know, basically what your relative stimulus is and exertion rates based on that session. So it kind of
Yeah.
marries the two. And then you've got grade assisted pace, haven't you? So you've got like,
Yeah. Always look
obviously
at
it's very
that.
generic like that, and it's not really that
Yeah.
relevant. But
No.
if you're doing a race that's got 1,000 meters in, and your overall grade assisted pace, as an example of a metric, looking at it and how you're kind of deciphering what is a good session and what's a not so good session, and your average pace is say 10-minute miles, but you've got 1,000 meters, you're doing something, and you're hiking most of the training, you're doing a
Mm.
lot right there, for example.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Nothing wrong with 10-minute miling. It's the
mate,
sweet
it
spot.
is the gold standard.
Yeah, I'm happy with 10 minutes. Okay, last then. So I've done this run. I'm feeling a little bit beaten up. I'm not feeling that bad actually, but well, we'll see tomorrow. What do I want to be doing now?
Right now,
Right now. Like,
chatting to me, mate. Chatting to me. That's
what do I want to be? Obviously, you know, protein. You want to be eating like X amount of protein and this and that. But in terms of my body, do I just want to be lying on the sofa?
let me tell you what, mate. Most of the best runners I've ever known definitely don't think about what they're eating afterwards. They go and have a coffee, they go and have a blueberry muffin and some fish and chips.
Okay,
Um,
right. I'll see you
yeah,
later. What's happening?
and this and the whole nutrition running industry with all of these supplementations and
Oh, yeah.
don't get me
I
wrong,
don't
mate.
deal with that protein. Yeah, after like
They
12
have a
hours.
very good, and I'm not a nutritionist, right? But they have a very researched component to them, and you can't really bypass kind of the general physiology of carb protein ratios for that, right? However, when you do a long run like you've just done, you've burnt through a shed ton of energy. So you want to replace some of the energy. And that's it. That's basically replacing the energy. And if you lie down, so you're like on the sofa smashing some fish and chips, right? I'm building in your. I know it's quite late where you are, mate, but I'm building in your evening now.
No, it's the shops are still open. Yeah.
So that might be what you need in that time. Your body gets very good at craving certain things, right? The more fatigued you are, okay. And if that is something that is what your body wants right now, you've got to give it a little bit of that, right? When I finished a few different races, I've had a pint, right? Don't get me wrong, probably the worst thing you could have. You know, it dehydrates you, but it had quite a lot of calories in it. And it's good. It was good morale at the time. So I had a burger and a beer, right?
Yeah.
Quality bit. And I'm not going to go and rush to my 3-in-1 kind of carbo drink
No.
because I don't really like doing that personally. And that's each to their own. But I would say for you, do what you want to do this evening, but then the next few days is quite important for you to get that of kind of mobility back into the system generally. So you want to try and do classic hot and cold is super, super effective to sort of just getting the muscle tissues to just take up a bit of, sort of neural kind of adaptation and sort of sweat release and all of these factors that come from that. So sauna and a cold plunge, as an example, super effective. Gentle, light stretching, but don't sit down at the desk and like let everything kind of go, adaptive, that big adaptive shortening that comes from, a repetitive action like running. Try and just move generally. There's no real like, oh, you need to be going back in the gym tomorrow and doing this, and this, or you need to be eating more greens to recover. Like, yes, they definitely play a role, but general movement, fueling what you've just done with something that fish and chips, bloody hell, got to live a bit, don't you? And just learning and piecing together what you've done in that run and what was good about it and what was. I'd always try and focus on what the good parts there, as buying into doing it again. You want to reinforce the good parts, but then leading out of it, you want to just give a rough gauge of how your body is recovering and how long it takes to then get back into the next run. So I'd definitely give it a few days.
Yeah.
Well, and in that few days, just working on that hydration, that general rest, sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my hydration was appalling out on the trail. I took 2.5 liters of water, and that was nowhere near enough.
Yeah.
So I had to stop and knock on somebody's door.
Yeah, I used to do that quite a lot. I not knock on random people's doors, but
yeah.
When I was prepping for a long run and logistically it was very difficult to sort of carry that amount of water on it, I would just put some drop bags in and just drive the route before and just stick a little drop bag in. And it just adds to the whole fun of it as well.
But future.
Yeah. And just going back to your point, finish on that is like, a lot of people get really wrapped around the axle about, race nutrition and food afterwards and what to do afterwards and what to do before. And it all boils down to, your body plays, it's holding the cards, if you know what I mean. So your brain and your body work obviously together. If your brain is saying, do this, if you know that it's not optimal, it doesn't really matter, mate, most of the time. It's just a case of understanding that what you've done. So, for example, long, hard, strenuous training run, dehydrated, underfueled, not enough calories. What's the first thing you need to do? Hydrate, get some calories in, basics. But then how has that affected you the few days afterwards? It's a bit like a hangover, isn't it? Right? If you've got a hangover, how is that affecting you the next day, the day after, and the day after that? And then when you start going back to the next run, you might feel terrible. But at least then you know that what you've done on that run, we might tweak it again the next time. Because there's no right way of doing anything, no matter what anyone says.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah. Well, cheers, Ed. I think, for me, I think the glutes were the main sticking point for me. So, yeah, if you could do up a little vid at some point, we'll share it on social media, and
definitely, yeah.
yeah, we'll go from there. But
All right, mate.
yeah, thanks very much for your time again. That was really good. Yeah, I've learned a lot. I hope everyone else has as well. I'm sure they have. But yeah, 50K. Get out and do it. It's harder than it sounds. It
I
really
was
is.
going to actually, I know you probably got to ditch this episode because we could probably talk for a few hours, but I was just going to go back to that point about, I said at the beginning about turning up to a start line. So I basically turned up to a start line of a super ridiculously hilly race. I didn't register the night before, which I should have done.
Mm.
It was 55
Was this in
kilometers,
the UK?
2,500 meters.
Was this in the UK?
Yeah.
When was it?
And everyone's out there doing their warm ups,
Yeah.
working on the calves,
Mm.
doing the breathing, eyes closed on the start
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
I rock up, right, with my brother. I kind of jump out the car, doors still open, don't have my shoes on, run to the tent, and they're counting down from 60 seconds to start. And then went in, I said, I need my bib number. I didn't register. Oh, didn't register. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry.
Mm.
Put my shoes on, do the laces up. Put my number, didn't manage to badge it on. So I put
Mm.
it across my bag and just cuffed it.
Yeah.
They all go out all singing, going, singing countdown and stuff like that. Anyway, I just thought, I'm running down the hill, running down the first section with my laces weren't tied up very, very well. One came off, blah, all the classic shit show.
Mm.
And then the first climb, I was like, oh, I'm feeling good now. Stopped, tied up my laces, put my number on, and I was bolting it. And I was leading the race for, I don't know, maybe 40K. And then wheels fell off a little bit because I hadn't had any water in my flasks. I hadn't had any food, nothing. But if it was 40K, I would have won. So I'm taking that. I'm taking that as a win. That there isn't always the best way of warming up. Most people, when they go into a race like a 50K, spend all of their time on these little things, but then when it comes to it, it overwhelms them. So their body tends to kind of tighten up, get jelly, get that kind of horrible jelly feeling.
Yeah. Just go out there and see what happens to a degree.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Learn the process, mate. Yeah.
Cool.
I thought I'd put that in at the end.
Nice one, Ed. Appreciate that, mate.
All right, mate.
Yeah, we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, nice one, buddy.